Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, the national anthem of Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on behalf of the Kyiv Security Forum. Congratulations on our holiday, the Day of Unity. Then before we start our roundtable discussion, let me remind you that today we have the anniversary of the murder in the center of Kyiv during the Revolution of Dignity of Sergei Nigayan. Let's pay homage to the memory of all the Ukrainian heroes who, with arms in their hands, laid down their lives for our state and its freedom. Thank you. It is a great honor for me to open today's national roundtable discussion initiated by the Kyiv Security Forum, founded by Arseniy Yatsenyuk's Foundation Open Ukraine. I'd like to give the floor to the chairman of the foundation, Mr. Arseniy Yatsenyuk. Dear friends, first of all, I'd like to thank you all, to thank you for being wise and strong and resolute enough to come here, irrespective of the fact that there are representatives of different political forces and different expert communities here. We're all different, but we're all united. We're united in that we realize that the most precious value for us is our country, our state. And the historic experience of Ukraine shows that more than 100 years ago we managed to collect and put together the Ukrainian lands, and now we should be strong enough to protect them and to return what Vladimir Putin has stolen from us. Within our lifetime, we met with the largest challenges for Ukraine. These are very important major challenges and a great responsibility, but this is also a great chance for every one of us. A roundtable discussion presupposes that someone is talking and the others are listening, and we should be able to hear out even your political opponents and to offer your view and to deserve that you are being heard. Russia is preparing a large-scale onslaught on our state, and it is largely depending on our unity, strength and cohesion that will determine whether Putin will be afraid of Ukraine, will fear Ukraine. The Ukrainian army is a prerequisite of our security. The Ukrainian nation, which is protecting our country with a single united spirit, is a prerequisite for us keeping Ukraine intact. During these times, we have to manifest unity and wisdom, and I call upon the President and the authorities of Ukraine to likewise realize that it is in unity that our force and strength lies, and our Ukrainian spirit depends on it. We will go through these challenges and we will definitely emerge victorious, and our triumph is in the fact that a round-table discussion like the one we're having here will show that Ukraine will withstand and emerge victorious. Thank you very much once again for agreeing to take part in this national roundtable discussion on national unity. Happy Ukraine's Unity Day to you, and I'm sure that 100 years down the road, our children, grandchildren will celebrate the Day of Ukraine's Unity with returned lands, the Crimea and Donetsk and Luhansk. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to thank all of those present here, representatives of political forces, parliamentary and extra-parliamentary, the public figures, leading experts. I thank the representatives of the diplomatic missions and the guests present here. We have live broadcast of this event. The broadcast is both in Ukrainian and in English. So therefore, today we are addressing not just Ukraine, we're sending a message to the whole world about the unity within our country. And we send the message about what the Ukrainian politicians and the public at large are concerned about. The Kyiv Security Forum, by holding this roundtable discussion, operates as a non-partisan public platform, and that our initiative is an attempt to initiate and to offer to the society a format of national dialogue which would be responsible and serious for the discussion of internal and external threats. This is something, in my opinion, which is very badly needed by Ukraine. I'd like to remind you that we have some time regulations. Please stick to time limits. They're quite rigid, but I hope that this will make it possible for us to work dynamically and finish on time. I would like to give the floor to Rafat Chabarov, head of the Majlis of the Crimean Tatars. Good morning to all the participants of the National Roundtable discussion. It has been 72 years since the agreement on unification of Ukraine was signed, and the Ukrainian nation obtained a free Ukrainian state in 1991. But on on the 103rd year of the annunciation of unity of Ukraine, a deadly threat is looming over Ukraine. The Majlis of the Crimean Tatars is wholeheartedly supporting all the initiatives related to the mobilization of the Ukrainian society. We've said this all along since the Crimea was occupied, because we understand that the major task or prerequisite for the existence of an independent Ukrainian state is the restoration of territorial integrity of Ukraine. Speaking about the present time, we are observing a considerable mobilization of the international community, with some nuances though, and all this requires our internal mobilization. So one of the proposals for our further work is the appeal to the authorities and the politicians and experts in Ukraine to clearly define our Ukrainian position at all international platforms, for us to avoid the grading of our tasks without any differences in the attitude to the issues of the return of the Donbas and of the return of the Crimea. There should be a single uniform formula of the restoration of the territorial integrity of Ukraine within our legal borders, including the the Autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sebastopol. This demand should be voiced at all international platforms. Now it is as important as never before. I give the floor to Josef Zisels, a human rights activist, member of the 1st of December group and a member of the group of resistance to capitulation. Mr. Zisels, the floor is yours. Good morning. Happy Ukraine's Unity Day to all of you. I have to agree with what the organizers said. 3 minutes is the optimum amount of time within which you can characterize the situation in Ukraine against the backdrop of political, military, and other crises that Ukraine is facing. I will be brief. Any planning or the terms of unity of the people, the defense of the nation, strategic planning, all kinds of different definitions which are related to the people as such, presuppose that we have pretty much the same collective identity of this notion.
And when it comes to religious and ethnic differences, we all understand them commonly, but at the same time, attitudes to the identity are fragmented. Nor do we have joint identity or else national consensus amongst 80% of the population who see the past, the present, and the future of Ukraine similarly within the major parameters. And I believe that the civilization identity based on a system of values and is common. And I think that it is a model of our society. Over hundreds of years, Ukrainians who lived in this territory had two centers of identity, European and Asian. As a result, we've got a mixed identity where in different proportions, different sub-identities are mixed. So Maidan and anti-Maidan, Russian-Ukrainian war and civil war are different polar or extreme representations of this identity. So we now see that this conflict is not exhausted by any projection, and it is truly an inter-civilizational conflict. And all of our vows are also a derivative of this internal conflict. And the values that underlie this conflict of civilization are very basic. And the transition from mixed identity to the European one is linked to a collective system of values. So it evolves through a very dire and very painful process. Our identity crisis is about the simultaneous presence of various models of collective identity that presuppose different presence of these identities. About 20% of Ukrainian citizens want to live together with the so-called Russian world, and it is a derivative of their collective identity. At the same time, 50% of Ukrainian citizens don't care what civilization model Ukraine would have in the future. They would just adapt to any model because to them the major value is survival. So the inter-civilizational conflict requires us to understand that the confrontation is about the difference in the identification of different people. So inter-identity peace is about non-interference with the identity of one another. And we can evolve thanks to the support of the civil society and our sincere allies in the European civilizations. And if we want to speed up this evolutionary movement, we need the powers that be in Ukraine to appreciate this process and support it. And last but not least, we have to elect representatives, members of parliament and presidents who value our European identity, not only verbally, not only in words, but also in their deeds. Thank you very much, Mr. Zissels. I would give the floor to Ambassador Valentin Vasilenko. He is member of the Strategic Council of the Capitulation Resistance Movement. Mr. Vasilenko, the floor is yours. Thank you. I would like to speak on a more mundane topics, and that is looming Russian aggression against Ukraine. Today, the gravest factor that urges us, the Ukrainian society and Ukrainian government to unite, is to resist the potential Russian aggression. The armed aggression by Russia is not a haphazard event. It is a very expected event because we know that Russia strives for the total destruction of the Ukrainian nation and Ukraine as a geopolitical phenomenon. So we should proceed from this in order to address everyday topics and challenges. Now we hear that Russia is preparing to invade Ukraine. But in fact, 8 years ago, it's exactly what Russia did. And now we are speaking only about the escalation of that invasion, about its expansion, about the expansion of the scale of the aggression. And that's what we should remember. Ukraine put up resistance to the aggressor. It failed to achieve its goal of fragmenting Ukraine and destroying its statehood, thanks to the very stringent support of our allies and partners, who also announced very dire sanctions against the Russian Federation. But the Russian Federation, you will know, never cared prepared about either economic or human losses if they strive to achieve their geostrategic aims and objectives. And we are thankful to our allies and partners for their support and assistance. But we also know that Ukraine is a key factor in deterring the aggressor. Ukrainian armed forces, our defense industry, and Ukrainian society, who have proven that they are capable of putting up resistance to the aggressor. And the efforts that we put into our defense should become a key factor of the consolidation and mobilization of the entire society. In order to achieve that, powers that be should take very specific, targeted steps and educate the people who still believe that the war in the Donbass is far away. But we should remember that Putin has waged his war against the entire Ukraine, not only its eastern part. So what amazes me is the inability of the government to organize the proper preparation for putting up resistance to the aggressor. Unless we are well prepared for that, Russia would invade Ukraine, and they are prepared to do that any moment now. And we should be prepared to face this aggression at any moment now. The society should be properly mobilized and taught and trained. Inactivity of the Ukrainian authorities are most felt in the legal and diplomatic field. Under the conditions of today, as matters stand, we should appeal to the authorities, to powers that be, to take up systemic steps. In particular, convene a session of Parliament to discuss the extraordinary situation that we are facing. But they are not doing it for some unfathomable reason. The president made a... Sorry, could you speak into the mic, please? Okay. So the president addressed the nation, but his message was neither clear nor responsible. The total mobilization should be declared. The state of emergency should be announced. A diplomatic note should be sent to the Russian Federation with a very clear demand to stop the preparation for an aggression. And this diplomatic note should be distributed to all UN states, member states. The government should also raise an issue of the UN Security Council considering Ukraine's issue at one of its sessions very soon. And what amazes me, what beats me, is why the Ministry of Foreign Affairs would not respond to the violation of human rights that take place on a daily basis in the temporarily occupied territories. So we should be raising these issues every day. I call on this esteemed assembly to agree on the statement that we've drafted and move along together. Thank you. Just once we discuss all of the issues on the agenda, we suggest that we sign a statement and appeal to the Ukrainian society and our international partners on the unity of the people, protection of democracy and defense of the state. Please remember that your time limit is 3 minutes, and I will be very strict with keeping the time limit. Now I will give the floor to Arsen Avakov, Minister of Internal Affairs of Ukraine in 2014-2021. Glory to Ukraine, glory to heroes. First of all, I would like to congratulate you all on the National Unity Day, Ukraine's Unity Day, because this supra-partisan unity is what we need, and it is vital for Ukraine today. Now the entire world sees that the Putin regime can get unleashed and lose common sense, and then we have a very limited choice. Either our successors will see us as those who couldn't overcome their parochial interests and narrow positions and did not see the future of Ukraine, or we can be remembered as a generation that protected Ukraine in the times of the hardest trials and tests. So those who believe that the situation is quite quiet and there's no threat looming in front of us, I will give you some stats. The length of the state border of Ukraine has increased by 1,800 kilometers of late since September. It's not news, but it requires a very proper response. Now, 54 battalion tactical groups of the Russian armed forces have been located on our borders. It's more than 100,000 troops. 6 battalions from the paratroop division of the Western group of the Russian Federation, and 16 tactical groups formed out of 8th Motor Division in the East. In Crimea, we've got 6 tactical groups and 1 paratroopers brigade, 2 brigades of SS-26 Stone with the range of 500 kilometers with the potential carrying of nuclear warheads. On our borders, there are 20 battalion tactical groups, and right now, in 40 kilometers away from Ukraine's border, we see a brigade of the troopers of the Belarusian armed forces, supposedly for the military exercises. The Russian troops will join them very soon at a field which is very close to our territories. The exercises are to take place from February 1 to February 20. So I believe that the probability of the large-scale invasion is higher than it was back in 2014. I'm giving you these figures not to scare you, but to make sure that you get prepared. All of us get prepared. So we wish these risks never materialize, but it's a passum parabellum. So we have to get prepared. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to heroes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Avakov. I give the floor to Mikhail Bessarab, coordinator of the movement to resist capitulation. Glory to Ukraine. It's a pleasure to be here, even more so because we yet again discuss our security as a key priority. Unfortunately, after the beginning of the war, during the years, we saw a diminishing attention to this issue, but unfortunately today's environment and conditions make it necessary for us to come back to this issue. When we speak about security, we speak about think about the future. If we think about Russia as the largest threat to our security and we want to forecast our future with Russia, we need to take a look at the history of our relationship with this country. Nothing different will happen in the future, different from what is happening between us for thousands of years, since the 12th century, and we should be ready that this will remain the case. As regards our domestic issues, I believe that one of the largest problems we're facing is getting bogged down in compromises with our post-imperial and post-Soviet past. Even looking for ways to address today's problems with Russia, we very often take the path of compromise. And this is not right. And today I'd like to use this opportunity, and I'm sure today people will speak about traditional, conventional security and energy security. I'd like to focus on some specific issues. Professor Vasilenko just said spoke about some problems in our relations with Russia. These problems do exist. A lot has been done, but not enough. Where are the blank spots? The strategy of sanctions is one of them, even though we have sanction legislation, and Mr. Yatsenyuk was one of the drafters of that legislation, and this sanctions policy was quite clear-cut during the first years, but now it doesn't look like a cohesive strategy. And the next issue is the policy for deoccupying of the occupied territories. There are a lot of unanswered questions here. And the third one is how to recoup the losses inflicted by the occupation of Russia upon Ukraine. The scope of damage to Ukraine stands at hundreds of millions of dollars. Another issue is the humanitarian aspect, and we have to understand that there should be no middle ground here. We either become part of the Western world and a sovereign state, or we will become part of Russia. We should be a separate country on all the issues ranging from rockets to the language. Kissinger once said a very important issue, that the mission of the elites lies in overcoming the abyss between the experience of the society and its aspirations. Thank you for your attention. I'd like to remind you that first of all, we take notes of all the presentations, and upon the results of our deliberations, we are planning to draft a kind of a menu of all the ideas and suggestions that the participants will have voiced. Apart from that, I'd like to remind you that we speak according to the alphabetic order, and the time limit is 3 minutes. I give the floor to Mr. Yevgen Bystritsky, head of the Civil Initiative Election Council, UA. Thank you. Warm welcome to all of you. This is a very important roundtable discussion, which prods us to a dialogue between the authorities and the civil society and other political forces. I'd like to dwell upon the dangers which were very often overlooked, but what lies on the surface and provides for the popularity and legitimacy of the current authorities. This is the ideology of popular rule. This is our modern translation of the Greek word democracy. I'd like to dwell upon the pitfalls of this new interpretation of this ideology. I will quote the electoral program of the sitting president. The rule of the public is a mechanism by which people will use referenda and other instruments as direct tools of democracy, which should be used with the use of modern technologies. On the surface, it looks nice. What's bad about it? It's direct democracy through, for instance, software DIA. What is bad about the interaction between the authorities and the elites with the people who kind of shape and carve out the tasks for the authorities through the referenda and so on? There's nothing bad about it on the surface. it's useful. Useful when we speak about the administration of the already established rules and legislation. There should be clarity of these rules of the game if we speak about issues like independence, accession to NATO, and so on. But direct democracy also includes a direct threat, because the large scope of issues and problems of the people are being translated into real tasks and policies for transformation and reform in Ukrainian democratic countries of the world. This is being done not directly but through representative democracy instruments, and I'd like to say a few words about that. What I am concerned about is that there's an idea of one-person dialogue between the president and the people, which diminishes the importance and influence of electoral democracy, inclusiveness, and representative democracy. Representative democracy is something which implies communication of all the authorities with the societies through the civic society. Democratic communication is far from just video clips showed to the people. It's much more than that. What are the pitfalls of this vision of democracy? The reforms are being slowed down. The reforms which were initiated after the Maidan, the reforms got started and moved forward through the use of activism and civic society efforts, through the efforts of volunteers, primarily during the first years of the war. Another dangerous consequence of this vision of democracy is the political arrogance of the authorities in their attitude to the positions of other political forces and their opponents, which leads to random decisions and half-baked conclusions. I'd like to conclude by saying that we should not cave in to these efforts of populism, of the idea of people's rule, because it is purely populistic and contradicts the true democracy, which should be inclusive and should include dialogues with the civic society and all other political forces. I believe that today's roundtable discussion is a direct response to this danger. I'd like to inform you that the Kyiv Security Forum invited to our roundtable discussion head of the parliamentary faction of the Verkhovna Rada, Servant of the People party. The invitation was not accepted, but it stands, and we continue to invite the authorities to this dialogue. The main task of our meeting is to assess the political situation in Ukraine against the backdrop of direct threat of a new aggression of Russia against Ukraine. And I give the floor to Andriy Beletsky, leader of the political party National Core. First of all, I would like to join in the chorus of good wishes on the occasion of Ukraine's Unity Day. Today, we are marking probably the largest since 2014. We are marking this day against the backdrop of the largest and most dangerous threats from the Russian Federation since 2014. And one of the key responses to this should lie in our unity. The recipe is not new. What we are talking about is that this is the recipe of 2014, the year when probably for the only time during our independence years, we had no political, confessional, regional differences. There was a uniform ideology which united us, and it was either you are for Ukraine or against it. And the developments of 2014 showed that this ideology works, that we can unite irrespective of all our differences. Now I would like to focus on some maybe narrow but very important critical issues. The first one, if we speak about unity, we should speak also about the other side of this matter, about the people who in Ukraine blatantly and openly reject the idea of unity and sovereignty of the Ukrainian state, about the fifth column which exists and operates freely in Ukraine, which is being developed in Ukraine with all their security private firms, with criminal groupings, with their own faction in parliament, with their own media that they control. Some of them have been sanctioned, some not. And if we're speaking about unity, we should also remember that it cannot exist where the fifth column has the freedom of action. We need a law on collaborators. Without any arbitrary decisions, but at the level of legislation, we should put an end to the operation of the fifth column in our country. There should be two drafts. There are two draft laws on collaborators. They have been at the consideration of the Parliament for 2 years already, and the consideration thereof is being blocked. Even though I wouldn't like to criticize anyone, but they are being blocked by the pro-presidential faction in Parliament. And the adoption of these laws is of paramount importance. Another issue is territorial defense. This is something which can considerably strengthen our defense capability, but it should be built not on paper but in real life. Three issues that I'd like to point out which makes the current idea of territorial defense profane. First of all, the medical commission. At the Special Operation Forces level, the requirements for this are level than for territorial defense detachments. Another issue is related to providing authorized weapons to groups of territorial defense. There are a plethora of issues. There's no time to enumerate all of them. But what I'd like to add that for the Ukrainian society, the key issue now is to understand very simple things. Unity, keep calm, but get ready. The unity of the people, protection of democracy, and defense of the nation. This is the title of our roundtable discussion. I give the floor to Alexei Harain, director of the Democratic Initiatives Foundation, named after Ilga Kucherev. The floor is yours. Since you mentioned that I am professor of the Kyiv Mohila Academy, I'd like to speak on a theoretical note at the beginning. We in Ukraine, we see that a political nation has been established and shaped in Ukraine. This is very important, and I congratulate all of us with this. I say to all of them, Добрий день, дзень добрий, шалам алейхим і йона подки вам. When people say that Ukrainians cannot get united, the history of Ukraine proves otherwise. There were times when Ukrainians united back in 1991, during the Orange Revolution, during the Euro Maidan, and in our fight against the Russian aggression.
Irrespective of all attempts to disunite us, to divide us. And I suggested that amongst the participants of this roundtable discussion, there should be representatives of the Servants of the People party. That would be most logical and natural. I wish they could be with us. Yes, of course, we are all human. We all make mistakes, and we will be making mistakes. But there are times when we should stand united. Therefore, I call on President Zelensky to be wise and determined in reaching out to the civil society and the political opposition, because a dialogue with the opposition can yield very good fruits. And with all my critical attitude to the president and his team, I believe that we should not require that he goes away, but we should unite and together move towards our victory. Now I will give the floor to Mr. Mikhailo Honchar, member of the Strategic Council of the Capitulation Resistance Movement. Good morning. Can you hear me now? Yeah. In it, we should put up total resistance to the attempt at total annihilation of Ukraine. And our priority should be the defense of the country and the strengthening of our national resilience. What matters today is the critical position that can enhance our resilience. We can observe the systemic work of our foreign allies towards this end. And I would say that they are our true allies because they've started to provide us with defense weapons and all of the necessary supplies. And we have to be very clear in articulating our priorities, including in what concerns territorial defense. We should have an entire network of resistance. For that, we require good coordination of effort at the national level, but since we don't have any representatives of powers that be here today, then we should articulate our own mission, being to urge the authorities and the civil society to form this network of resistance. Speaking about specific proposals, I can mention but some of them, and it is up to the National Security and Defense Council and the Verkhovna Rada to set up good supply of lubricants and fuel for the armed forces of Ukraine, the National Guard of Ukraine, and the territorial defense units. In terms of the national economy resilience, we are living through a very difficult winter season. But life will go on after the winter as well, and we will have to pile up the gas and oil supplies for the next winter season with a sufficient supply of gas, of coal, of other fuel and lubricants. And we should also work against the saboteurs inside Ukraine. One of the parts of putting up this total resistance is what we observed back in 2014. Remember the volunteer battalion Azov that later transferred into one of the best units, detachments of the National Guard of Ukraine. They are in the lead of Ukraine's defense at the front. And it is just one of the examples of what we should do today. I've got other proposals, and I will submit them to the organizers at a later stage. Thank you very much, Mr. Honchar, and I would also like to thank those participants of the roundtable discussion who submitted their proposals in writing writing to the organization committee. They will all be summarized and posted on our resources. Now I will give the floor to Lilia Grinevich, Deputy Head of the political party Ukrainian Strategy, Volodymyr Groysman. Thank you, Mr. Lubkivsky. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank the Kyiv Security Forum and its chair, Arseny Yatsenyuk, for bringing us together for this dialogue. It is extremely important under the circumstances of today. I mean, internal and external threats and challenges Ukraine is facing. Our leader has commented on the main issues that are under consideration today, but I would like to highlight some of the priority issues. First of all, it is not the time for fighting amongst various political elites and political parties. We have to focus on our security, including energy security. Then we should think of providing security and secure environment to Ukrainian businesses and civil society. We have to consolidate the effort or concert the effort of the Ukrainian people, of the Ukrainian society, so that we understand what needs to be done once the aggression starts. And we, while speaking to our international partners, usually emphasize that Ukraine is at the forefront of the protection of the civilized world. Now we can see the conflict between two paradigms, civilizational paradigms, the democratic one and the authoritarian one. But if we fight against the authoritarian system of values as represented by Russia, we see some of the symptoms of leaning towards authoritarianism on the part of the Ukrainian authorities. This idea of coming together and uniting, we expect that the government should be the proponent of this idea. They should bring together the most experienced people, experts, representatives of the civil society and political parties. But we hear the president who seemingly wants to lullaby the people into sleep, while we require very honest and decisive position. We need instructions on what exactly needs to be done in the sphere of security and defense, and what every regular citizen in Ukraine should be doing under this or that scenario. That's exactly what the responsible government should be doing. We, on our part, also declare our preparedness for the consolidation of effort. And we hope that this dialogue that is launched on the Ukrainian Unity Day will give rise to the unification of progressive forces in the face of threats to our country. It is my great pleasure to give the floor to Mr. Yuri Godimenko, co-founder of the political party Democratic Acts. The floor is yours. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. I don't think there would be a single country in the world that would say that it is totally prepared to end aggression, because there is always room for improvement. There is always some strategy that can be suggested and improved. So I would reformulate the question of today's discussion. Have we done everything necessary to protect us to the best possible way against the Russian aggression? And my answer is no, we haven't. We've lost a lot of chances, and we've missed a lot of opportunities. First of all, when it comes to cybersecurity, the recent cyber attacks against Ukraine shows that Ukraine is defenseless against the Russian hackers in the cyberspace. And the Ukrainian authorities fail to understand and appreciate what's going on, and they live in some parallel reality. Once Dia software was cracked, just those who actually promoted it say that it will be used, this software will be used for the next elections of the President Parliament. So we should unite and object to this idea. Then territorial defense and law on weapons or access to weapons. I believe that all of us, the opposition and the authorities alike, should change our approach to weapons and carrying weapons and we should see it in a different light. We should be free to get arms to prepare for the aggression, like the Swiss civilians are. So I believe that it will allow us to mobilize thousands and hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians. My third point is about the fifth column. We know that we have pro-Russian political parties, we've got pro-Russian media in the country, and there are thousands of police officers and police stations who hope that they will be part of the Russian police force and they will be omnipotent. So I insist that the law on collaborationists will be adopted one day, and I insist that it should be adopted as soon as possible, and it should also be adopted along the law on the security forces of Ukraine, that is SBU. We've been discussing the security situation, but we should understand and we should let our enemy or potential enemy understand that we will be putting up resistance, we will be fighting, and that first Russian tanks will be set on fire, and then the Kremlin might be set on fire. Thank you very much. The floor would be given to Volodymyr Yermolenko, member of the 1st December Initiative Group. Thank you very much, colleagues. No doubt we have to survive, we have to overcome our enemy, and we have to think of what is going on now, but we should also think strategically. And if we analyze the threats that we are facing now, and we analyze international best practices of withstanding such threats, we will see where to take our ideas about our future and about what we want to be in the future. One of the key ideas that should inspire us today is the idea of our national agency. 30 years of independence have witnessed an intellectual environment whereby we were borrowing some ideas from abroad. We've been trying to plant those ideas, both good and bad, here on our national soil, but never thought about how our own agency evolves at different levels, at the level of the community, at the level of the nation, at the level of the world outview. Then, do we have a global idea that will unite all Ukrainians? For example, do we have people that think strategically for their respective regions where they live? Are we prepared to discuss what's going on at the inter-regional levels between, say, the Baltic Sea nations and the Black Sea nations? And it is the result of the situation whereby there is a threat of a new authoritarianism, and we see that the new European idea, the Western world, are not as strong as we would like it to be. It is actually taking a defensive position. It is retracting. That's why the Russian Federation is on the offensive. And we in Ukraine should be the force that will stop this defensive, renaissance of our Western partners. And we should be thinking about our future. We are not quite critical when we analyze democracy as an idea. Democracy in the West has always been balanced by meritocracy, by a force that actually brings up the best in the nation. And I am afraid that over these 30 years, we've lost this mechanism of meritocracy, and we should be focusing on the sphere of education, human development, and human capital enhancement. Thank you.
Thank you, dear colleagues. This dialogue was designed by us as a profound and serious talk. And it's very gratifying to see how rich is the palette of our today's views and ideas, ranging from our domestic internal dialogue to what Vladimir Yermolenko has just spoken about our role in the world, about being an actor in its own right. I give the floor to Mikhailo Zhernakov, who is the chair of the board at the De Jure Foundation. I also will speak about the security dimension of law enforcement bodies, not just because some of them, just like the military, have authorized weapons and uniform, but they have authorities which can inflict harm to Ukraine more than the enemy's tanks. And they are not on the borders, but within the borders, and they speak on behalf of Ukraine, but very often they have an identity which is not shared with Ukraine, but closer to the mentality of Verkhovna Rada Police or the enemy forces. Therefore, getting cleaned up of all these elements is really key. We have some successes in judicial reform. In July, certain laws were put in place, some judicial bodies were cleansed. But there's no point to dwell upon this because there are two key judicial bodies which pose a serious threat to Ukrainian statehood. 15 months has passed since the decision by the Supreme Court was to abolish the system of electronic declaration, and since that time not a single reform of the Constitutional Court or other key institutions has taken place in Ukraine. The Kyiv Circuit Court, which basically on the daily basis takes decisions either to roll back some reform in the military or to cancel decommunization or to bring back the corrupt people to their positions. 9 months has passed since the president ruled to abolish that court, but unfortunately it has not been considered by the parliament for a single time. I'm not criticizing here, but the bitter irony lies in the fact that the Circuit Court and the National Security and Defense Council is in the same courtyard, but unfortunately it looks like the National Security and Defense Council fails to see that such a dangerous body is next to them. The fifth column should be cleansed out of the state, liquidated sometimes, in some instances, and only then we will be able to defend ourselves properly. I wholeheartedly support the appeal to complete the judicial reform in this final statement of this roundtable discussion. This is really key if you want to push back against the Russian aggression and to resist the problems within the country. Glory to Ukraine. I give the floor to Serhiy Kvit, member of the Strategic Council of the movement Resistance to Capitulation. Thank you very much. In my very brief intervention, I would like to draw your attention to the public rhetoric of the Ukrainian political class when we talk about the the sitting authorities and the opposition as well. Our realities create a lot of temptations for politicians not to address the whole nation, but to address individual social groups and dishing out all kinds of promises to them. But that backfires on them later on. But what is important for us at the moment, and for the authorities for that matter, is that we need to address the whole nation to make it more cohesive, more united, more unanimous and mobilized at the national level. These are issues of critical importance, and this should be backed up by certain political actions. We're also being observed by our allies, or those who are would-be allies of ours, and our clarity in that respect also mobilizes them. We are also being watched by post-Soviet countries which became independent and now are in dire straits. You see the situation in Kazakhstan at the moment. For instance, we should understand that Russia itself has no cohesion or unity within itself, because there are a lot of autonomous republics like Bashkortostan, Tatarstan, and so on. So our cohesion and unity is an example for others to follow and a prerequisite for our strength. And this political rhetoric of our political force sets the tone for the society. It's absolutely key. We have to remember about that. And if promises are being made, they should be given to the whole society, to all the nations, and then people will bring those who make those promises to account. I also would like to support my colleague Vladimir Yarmolenko about education being important, critical thinking being important. Education is not less important than the judicial reform or other reforms, for instance, the reform of the military. Without secondary and higher education in Ukraine, our society will not be developing. Without proper scientific development, we will not be successful. There's no getting away from it. We cannot economize on funding those areas, and the Ukrainian politicians who would like to have political future should bring forth the slogans to raise the quality of the education during the forthcoming elections. I give the floor to Pavlo Klimkin, co-founder of the Center for the National Resilience and Development. I recall that many years ago, on this day, the unification was not the only scenario for Ukraine. Likewise, today, Ukraine's existence and its status of an independent player is not guaranteed. The stakes in the talks that Russia is engaged in, but basically these are not talks. It's not about guarantees, which actually nobody needs and nobody believes in. And it's not about redistribution of spheres of influence, which is very often referred to as a new Yalta. These stakes are about political redistribution. And the main argument which Russia is using, and unfortunately which is being bought by many in the West, is about Ukraine being allegedly an artificial entity, and it cannot be established as an independent player. But as a matter of fact, we will not be able to avoid having to provide the cohesion of the society in issues like territorial defense and otherwise. There's no getting away from us from having to reaching a higher level of resilience in energy, in cybersecurity. We understand about the decisions which are being taken, but nothing practically is being done. We also cannot get away from having to focus on the improvement of education or judicial reform. Likewise, we will not be able to do without a new constitution finally, and without a new civil accord agreement. We are not just talking about large-scale aggression of Russia. We're talking about the wish of Russian elites, not just Putin, to destroy Ukraine as such. No matter how often we speak about a fantastic drive and emotions within the Ukrainian society, all this is correct. But at the same time, in this hall, there's quite a few people who should undertake responsibility, because in the future we may not be defended just because we are politically important for someone. And the developments of the last few years probably show that the next years will be key for Ukraine being an independent, sovereign state and an actor in its own rights. If we forget about that, all we do will be a non-starter. So we have to think about what we should do right now, and we should not waste time. Thank you. Thank you all for sticking to the time limits. I'd like to remind you that the time limit for interventions is 3 minutes. We are being broadcast live, including for international audience, because we have a simultaneous translation into English. The main question of our roundtable discussion is your assessment of the political situation of Ukraine against the backdrop of the threat of a new aggression of Russia against Ukraine. And I give the floor to Mr. Oleg Lyashko. I misspoke, I said Alexander, I apologize. Mr. Oleg Lyashko, leader of the Radical Party of Ukraine. I thank the Kyiv Security Forum and personally Mr. Arseniy Yatsenyuk, because there's no issue which is more important than unity today against the backdrop of a deadly threat which is looming over our country. Unity is something which will help us to keep and safeguard our country the way you did in 2014. That is why I'm here today, and I represent our political party, the Radical Party of Ukraine. It's really a shame that at this table there's no President Zelensky or representatives from his political force. This is a very bad sign, just like the speech of the president made a few days ago, who instead of uniting the nation accused the people who say that we should be vigilant and get ready for the worst. The society should be united for a fight, and it would be suicidal to think that the 95th quarter political force in the authorities will defend the country. Therefore, I address all the political forces who should not compete in terms of their popularity ratings or election odds, but the defense of the country, because otherwise no one of us will need any popularity ratings. So those who showed up here today demonstrated that they do care about Ukraine and our future generations. I address the president who, by the will of God and the citizens of Ukraine, takes the most exalted position in our country. Put aside your ambitions, bickering and infighting. There's nothing more important than the defense of the country. You, as the president, should unite the society and all the political forces, instead of splitting up the society through your parochial actions. because this is about the defense of our country. I address the President, release the political prisoners who took part in the liberation war and the ATO, and bring back to their positions the generals and the military who were dismissed, fired on political grounds. We need to unite the country and give people a chance to actualize themselves and defend the nation. I address the members of the Radical Party and all other parties. Get signed up for territorial defense. Let's take up arms and defend the country. Our force is in unity, and today's roundtable discussion is the first, very important, but I hope not the last step towards uniting the nation, uniting our politicians, uniting Ukrainians for the sake of the defense of our country. I thank Oleg Leshko, the leader of the Radical Party, for his intervention.
And I will give the floor to Mr. Grigory Nevira. He is deputy head of political party Verkhovna, deputy head of the parliamentary committee on foreign affairs. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this roundtable discussion. I will be very brief, and I will speak about 10 talking points. First of all, history teaches us that it's under the national threat that countries set up national unity governments. And under such threat, it's my second point, what the nation needs is not words, but swift and coordinated actions. 3, unity is an obvious priority to all. But the issue, the problem is broader than the decisions and solutions proposed. So we should have policies, but also tools to implement those policies. In order to achieve unity, we should implement strong and consistent policies. 4, what Ukrainians need is not ruinous demagogy, but responsible dialogue. 5, our foreign policy should be much broader than about relations with other countries. It should be about the national interests that Ukraine wants and is capable of protecting and implementing. 5, we should remember that foreign policy starts at home. Security policies start at home. We cannot have any effective security and foreign policies without very solid foundation inside the country. 6, the peace on the position of force is a formula that does not work only for powerhouses like America of Donald Reagan, but it should be also our philosophy. 7, true solidarity, true union is not just about what needs to be done, but also about what shouldn't be done. We shouldn't always try to be the only leaders of the opposition. We should not try to assign all good to ourselves and blame others for all the evil. 8, the true patriotism unites rather than divides. True patriotism enhances rather than weakens. True patriotism has nothing to do with xenophobia and extremism. 9, institutions, they are extremely important. We should do everything to strengthen parliament and parliamentarianism. A strong parliament is not just a collection of people representing one party. It should be a sphere of influence of the entire Ukrainian nation. And the Verkhovna political party has come up with a very clear plan with very clear actions for liquidation of poverty, creation of jobs, and defense of the country. Our position is constructive, and we do not support the idea of putting up with evil just for the sake of ratings. Ratings are important, but sovereignty and integrity of this country are much more important. Thank you very much. I would like to give the floor to Volodymyr Grisko, former Foreign Minister of Ukraine and member of the Strategic Council of the Capitulation Resistance Movement. Thank you. Dear colleagues, it's my great pleasure and honor to be amongst you. And I am a non-partisan person, and I can speak more freely than many of you. And I can be speaking about what matters from the standpoint of our national security and safety. And the best gift to our adversary, and that is not Putin, but the Russian Federation as a state that presents the greatest global threat to all of us. So I believe that the best gift to the adversary is our disunity, is division within the Ukrainian society. So we should go above differences in our opinions and look at the situation from the standpoint of our national interests. We should put an end to infights amongst political parties. The authorities should stop criticizing and oppressing the opposition. The opposition, in turn, should stop criticizing the authorities en masse. They should be constructive in their criticism. Only then will we be able to achieve our goals. And I agree with Andriy here and Yuri Gudimenko in that the authorities seem to overlook those people and those forces who keep destroying our country from within. Isn't it our common task to be very specific in our actions and in demanding that the powers that be put an end to the existence of the fifth column in our country? I think it is our priority. Don't all of us have to do our best for our defense system to be sufficient for proper resistance to be put up to the Russian aggression? Isn't the Ukrainian land lease a topic that should urge all of us to think about bringing all of our potential to use in order to protect our country? A lot has been said about territorial defense. I agree that all of us should have arms when the time comes to protect our country, and we should know what the course of action should be once aggression starts. And we need very specific and clear instructions on what needs to be done, when and how. And I thank Lilia Grinevich for her very specific proposals. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Arseniy Yatsenyuk, for initiating this discussion. And I think this dialogue should continue, because that's exactly what we need, what our society needs. And I hope that our next session will also embrace representatives of the authorities. Thank you, Mr. Grisko, and I see that the main denominator of our discussion is very consonant with what you are saying. Mr. Poroshenko, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for your participation, and I will give the floor now to Petro Poroshenko, leader of the European Solidarity Political Party, President of Ukraine in 2014-2019. The floor is yours. Thank you very much, Danilo. I would like to thank the organizers, you, Mr. Arsenyuk, personally, because it's a most timely and most symbolic event held on the day of Ukrainian national unity. And our major message should be about unity. Who has ever visited Fastov well knows that it is the place where a historic agreement on bringing together Ukrainian People's Republic and Western Ukrainian People's Republic was signed. And the ideas declared then are most topical today in Ukraine. It's not difficult to get united. And it's not about us that we cannot unite. And I am proud to state now that back in 2014, I, in my capacity of the Supreme Commander and Commander-in-Chief, and Arseniy Yatsenyuk as Prime Minister, and our colleagues did everything to unite and actually maintain peace in our country and preserve this country. At the same time, we should not repeat the mistakes of the past, from Hetman Skoropadsky to Zelený Ataman. Stand shoulder by shoulder to protect your land against our enemies. That's what Simon Petlura said in St. Sophia Square in 1918. That's exactly what we should do today. So I call on all of you for unity, for a symbolic act that we should drop and sign today. I wish we could have representatives of the ruling party and President Zelensky with us, but we cannot be hostages of the situation. We should be proactive. When I spoke yesterday, I said that, of course, Mr. Zelensky is not a friend of mine, and I would not think of actually working together with him. But the situation is unique now, and the authorities and democratic political forces should get united for the sake of Ukraine, and this symbolic act should be drafted and signed as well, the unity between the authorities and the opposition. Over the recent 8 years, we've come to understand that the one who does not want to feed its own army would feed the enemy's army. Then, if you want peace, prepare for the war. And Moscow does not believe in tears. And the fourth one is we should strive to be members of the EU and NATO. And this can be the platform that would bring all of us together. Thank you very much, Mr. Poroshenko. Now I will give the floor to Vitaly Portnikov, who is a journalist and a leader of public opinion in this country. Thank you. On the one hand, I am worried to be the only journalist amongst the esteemed participants of this discussion. But at the same time, I remember that there was only one journalist more than 100 years ago when the Act of Unity was signed, and that was Simon Petlura. And that was enough to mobilize people to protect the country and to put up resistance to the enemies of that time. But that presence of one journalist was not enough to win, because what was lacking was the all-national unity of the supporters of Ukrainian statehood. So I would refer to the career of another journalist who took risks and won, and it is Winston Churchill, who is a role model for many Ukrainian politicians. You would remember that shortly before the Second World War, shortly after the Second World War, Winston Churchill lost power. He lost elections to one who supported him during all wartime years, the leader of the opposition party who was part of the government of the national unity. And it was thanks to the fact that the opposition party was part of the government. Winston Churchill rose as a national leader. To us, it seems incredible how you can actually give up leadership for the interest of the entire nation. But it was then that the Brits demonstrated that if you are after the unity of the nation, you can make concessions in order to organize the all-national resistance to the enemy. That's how the entire world learned about true leadership of Winston Churchill. That's why the history took the path it did during the Second World War. That's why our countrymen and countrywomen in the streets of Kyiv speak Russian rather than German, which could have been the case had we lost that battle. So if we still want to be speaking Ukrainian and Russian in the streets of Ukrainian cities and towns and villages, we should come together, we should get united on these national platforms. Churchills rise only when nations get united. Thank you very much, Mr. Portnikov, and I will give the floor to Dmytro Razumkov, head of the parliamentary caucus Smart Politics, chairman of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine in 2019-2091.
Thank you very much for the organization of this roundtable discussion. Today, Ukraine, as never before, requires unity around the challenges that we are facing. Some of them are new, some of them are with us since 2014. Primarily, we're talking about the war. So there are two issues about defense capability of our country, which is quite a problematic issue now. The amassment of enemy forces around our borders. Definitely this does not make us any more optimistic, those who are aware of this. Another issue is diplomacy, the position of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine and all those who understand that there are a lot of weak points with us on the foreign policy track. If there's a lack of knowledge and experience, probably it would be a good idea to involve people who are more knowledgeable and to come back from non-conventional diplomacy to the classical diplomacy, which is well-grounded and required today. Another set of challenges are related to energy security. We all understand in what shape the economy of our country is, and all the challenges of the energy system of Ukraine. We know how inefficiently we prepared for the heating season, all the issues related to the Nord Stream 2. There was a lack of proper preparation to meet those challenges on the part of the authorities. And the first role was played by the parliament, which reacted quite fast, and on the basis of the parliament, we, irrespective of political affiliations and political slogans, managed to get things forward. We should not speak about the popularity ratings of parties or who's the boss. This is the issue of whether we can keep our country or not. I yesterday called upon the President to come to the Verkhovna Rada and to discuss the issues of security challenges facing our country. I understand that the President wants to be the sole, unchallenged leader of the country, but this leads to usurpation of power. But we should remember that he will not be able to do anything without the Parliament and the civic society. And if it's not the President who unites the country, the people will do this instead of him. He should remember this. Thank you very much. I give the floor to Ms. Kira Rudik, head of the political party Голос, The Voice. Thank you very much. I welcome and wish all of you and all of those who are watching us very happy Ukraine's Unity Day. 100 years ago, the West Ukrainian Republic and the Ukrainian People's Republic decided to unite. 103 years down the road, we as a nation are still learning the lessons of unity. Can we now, and today I've heard a lot of appeals for unity from politicians, civil society activists and the journalists. Can we say that our political establishment is capable of unification now? I'm sure that it is. Just take a look at our rhetoric and joint actions when we work not within the country, but when we cooperate with our allies at the international level. And I'd like to use this opportunity to express my gratitude to our international allies for their invaluable assistance which we are getting. I am very grateful to you that Ukraine is not abandoned in the face of Russia's aggression, that on a daily basis we get positive news about assistance being provided for Ukraine by our international partners. This is crucial. And no matter what the Ukrainian authorities say, we know that there will be a new day and more good news. When situation gets critical, like it is the case now, it's very easy to evaluate any action, because we should use just two criteria to assess it: whether it serves to unite or divide the Ukrainian nation, and secondly, whether it strengthens us as a nation or weakens us. It's all very straightforward, and it makes it easier to take decisions against the backdrop of a crisis. As the head of the political party Голос Voice, I would like to call upon all the pro-Ukrainian patriotic forces. It's not the time to remember about our differences. Time has come to work together. All the other issues can be addressed once we've been through the crisis. Now it is the time to take responsible decisions, to take responsible steps, and to work together for the good of our country, to make sure that the 104th anniversary of Ukraine's unity should be celebrated in a better shape than we are now. Thank you. I give the floor to Mr. Ruslan Ryaboshapka, co-founder of the Center for National Resilience and Development. Dear Ukrainians, participants in this roundtable discussion, very happy Ukraine's Unity Day to you and Ukraine's Unification Day. War has been going on in Ukraine for 8 years, and the enemy is using the tactics divide and conquer. The enemy has taken part of our territory, Crimea and Donbass, and is sowing the seeds of discord within our society. Obviously, the only way to oppose that lies in unity. Unfortunately, over the last 30 years, we've failed to build a strong and rich country. And we have to think about it now, how to make our country strong and rich. We cannot be strong and rich given the state institutions which are being ruined and which are being affected by nepotism and corruption. So we should think about how we should restore their proper status. We should also think about how to restore independent judiciary and justice, because if the courts are being ruled by nepotism and connections, we cannot be called a country with the rule of law. And we have to think about it right now. In this hall, there are a lot of people who have opponents. We may have different views about the current authorities, but each of us is ready to put aside our differences and to extend the hand of cooperation to the authorities and to invest our experience and knowledge into this. This is not about authorities, this is about Ukraine. I call upon the authorities not to reject our proposal, because this is not what we or the authorities need, this is what Ukraine needs. I give the floor to Ostap Semerak, Minister of the Environment of Ukraine in 2016 through 2019. Thank you very much. I'd like to extend my warmest greetings on the occasion of Ukraine's Unity Day, and to thank the organizers, Open Ukraine Foundation, the Kyiv Security Forum, and personally Mr. Arseniy Yatsenyuk for the initiative to hold this roundtable discussion and for inviting me to attend. We are gathered here by the threat which is looming over Ukraine, and our understanding of our responsibility and the necessity of our unity. Those who are not here today are either light-minded people or enemies, or maybe they've missed their flight and maybe they're going to join us later on. The place around this table, in this circle of people, is always free for those who would like to join in, and I'm sure that you all would subscribe to that view. But unfortunately, time is tight. And we're here not the only people in Ukraine who think so. I'm sure that our country pretty much shares this view, as well as our partners and allies do, and this is also the view of God, I'm sure. Everyone expects from us a clear position, a clear plan, and resolute actions and unity. And I'm sure that all these things are in place here around this table, and we all share these views. I will remind you that all this, we can live up to this task because we did this back in 2014, and we are ready to do it again together. In my opinion, there's a serious imbalance between the resistance to the long-term aggression of Russia against Ukraine and the civilized world. Our partners, the West, and our allies are pretty much united, but the Ukrainian authorities manifest the weakness of their position. They sometimes dismiss the danger, and they should have realized this long time ago, as a matter of fact. There are no representatives of the authorities here today, and it only stands to reason because there are a lot of questions that they cannot answer. Questions related to our defense capabilities, corruption, persecution of the opposition, rollback on reform, and so on. I'm surprised at the position of the president, who calls the threat rumors, and he says that our land is not being attacked. It's our nerves which are being attacked. And since I was introduced here as the Minister of Environment, I would like to introduce some other issues of security into our discussion: the environmental, ecological security. The authorities are basically ignoring the issues of nuclear safety because of corruption. Centralized storages for nuclear fuels are not being built. They started being built during the previous government, but they are not being built now. And this is also related to our economic ties with the Russian Federation, which sometimes enriches the Russian Federation. Therefore, I call upon all of us for unity, because the best response to the adversary is our unity and our success domestically. I give the floor to Alexander Sushko, Executive Director of the International Renaissance Foundation. Thank you very much. Warmest greetings on the occasion of the Unity Day. I, on the one hand, is rejoicing that we have such a broad potential for unification when people with different tactical and ideological visions get together around the same table and speak pretty much in the same voice. It's a shame that the authorities are not represented here. This is not a problem of ideology, but probably the problem of political technologies, because they have become hostages to their own political technology, which separated them from the public at large. Something should be done about that, because they cannot carry on like this, being hermetically separated from the society. It's very good that the invitation for the authorities stands, and our rhetoric vis-à-vis the authorities is not confrontational. The next few days will be a climax of our standoff with the Russian Federation. After the Kremlin receives written reply from the Washington, something should happen. We understand that this is coming. This is on the threshold, and we understand that the first half of February will be very alarming, because the situation can go one way or another, but it can hardly get frozen. So we should be ready for this climax, morally, organizationally, and otherwise. And basically we are doing everything which should be done to mobilize our allies at the state level, at the non-governmental level, when we mobilize international experts and opinion leaders across the world to defend Ukraine and Ukraine's democracy. And, well, further on, we will go through February, and then a fundamental question will arise, because unlike the Cuban crisis, the issue will not be resolved by the pullback of rockets, because the problem is existential. It's about the right of the Ukrainian nation to decide its own future and its own fate.
And we understand that this issue would not be resolved either this year or the next year, because it will always be raised by our adversaries. And we should be ready for the competition in the best case scenario and confrontation in the worst case scenario. And now we are speaking about survival, about our capability to build horizontal relations, and our capability of strengthening our national state institutions, because strong institutions and living relations between the state and the citizens is very important. Our citizens should feel that it is their country. They should feel ownership of their statehood, and only thus we will be able to prove that country is not a failed state. Thank you very much, Alexander. These are two mutually related ideas, that some tyranny can challenge the very existence of our independent nation. And on the other hand, it's a unique chance for all of us to strengthen our country capable of protecting its sovereignty. And it is my great pleasure to give the floor to the MP of the first convocation of Verkhovna Rada, who voted for the act of independence, national independence of Ukraine. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The time of challenge is also the time of opportunities, and we should seize this opportunity for the Ukrainian politicians to become Ukrainian statesmen and stateswomen. So lack of unity is a weakness of our state. It has been so for quite a while. Before 2014, the state did nothing to make sure that interregional differences and discords would be addressed, and those gaps would be closed. And that's what our enemy exploited. They attacked us because they believe that Ukraine is weak and disunited. And we can assume that the task number one for Ukrainian authorities should be to form this space of Ukrainian unity. But what we see instead is this split, not only amongst regions, but also amongst different layers of the society. The poor against the rich, the laymen against the business persons, the opposition against the authorities. As a result, all of the country gets weaker. What shall we do? We should come together and become stronger. We should put an end to the discord amongst political leaders. We should initiate a true, meaningful dialogue between the government and the civil society. We should speed up the production of the missile complexes and anti-aircraft defense complexes as well, all the defensive weapons. We should sign a memorandum. I mean, those politicians who support Ukrainian independence should sign this memorandum today. Then this memorandum should be sent to the president for a dialogue between the authorities and the civil society to be launched. Within this dialogue, an agreement should be reached about the government of national unity and national mobilization. We should also appeal to Parliament of Ukraine, urging them to revisit the national budget to shift some of the money, says 3 billion hryvnias, from the road construction to the defense sector. Then we should also use the money allocated to other sectors to enhance the capacity and capability of local territorial communities to deploy units of territorial defense. Thank you very much. Before I give the floor to Mr. Oleg Ternibok, I would now ask Mr. Levis to speak. He joined us quite recently, and he is coordinator of the movement of resistance to capitulation. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we often hear a formula from politicians and our fellow citizens, nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine, and I would add, and without Ukrainians, because sometimes I have an impression that for at least a part of the world, Ukraine equals to the Ukrainian authorities. But I would say that some of the actions conducted by Mr. Yermak, for example, Chief of Staff of the President, are not guided by Ukrainian interests. And when we speak about Ukraine's independence and protection of democracy, we have certain milestones like Orange Revolution, Revolution of Dignity, and the threat that we are all facing today. So first of all, we should be discussing how the civil society should get united. That is, the former participants of Euromaidan and Revolution of Dignity. How can we achieve this goal? There is a lot of discussion about memoranda to be signed or structures to be put in place for that. But what we truly have to unite is the entire nations. Only then will we be able to discuss political parties and their unity. unity. Because the way to unite is very simple. Our movement is just one of the examples of how this can be done. Our movement proves that it's best way to get united around some specific actions and deeds. I will tell you about what we are doing now, and I invite you to join in. A couple of weeks ago, when this crisis diplomacy started to be very proactive, we addressed to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Digital Transformation, and we launched a large campaign, #Ukrainians will resist. Then Ukrainians against Putin in 37 countries. Ukrainian diaspora representatives went into the street with their slogans, making their statement that Ukraine and Ukrainians will resist. And today we've got this chain of unity, say yes to Ukraine. And we can see that last night and in the morning today, we've seen lots of actions and rallies by Ukrainians across the world, even in the Seychelles Islands and the Canary Islands. And I invite all of you to a historical landmark, to Saint Sophia Square, to have a rally and demonstrate that we Ukrainians can get united and win as a united nation. I will give the floor to Oleg Ternibok, head of the political party Svoboda. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, or is it afternoon? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My warmest congratulations to all of you on the Ukrainian Unity Day. 104 years ago, the Central Council declared Ukraine's national independence with the so-called Fourth Universal. And now there is a bill on the succession of that Central Council. Should this bill be adopted into a law, we will thus declare that Ukraine takes its roots from the Ukrainian People's Republic rather than from the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. And this can be the platform on which all of the Ukrainians can get united. And then we, like Poland, like Finland, like other European countries, will be celebrating 104th anniversary of our sovereignty and independence. This Unity Day is a sweet, bitter holiday, because we understand that what Putin strives to achieve is to get the Minsk agreements implemented by the Ukrainian party on his terms. Should it be done, it will undermine the security of Ukraine. It can mean true capitulation. That's why we believe, and this statement on the unity of the people, protection of democracy and defense of the state should include very specific demands addressed to Ukrainian authorities and appeals to some Western governments, the US, the German government, the French government, not to insist on the implementation of the Minsk arrangements on Putin's terms, because it might mean the disaster, the catastrophe for Ukraine. So I hope you will share this position of ours, and I'm sure that those Ukrainians who understand what it is all about will support our initiative. And of course, the Ukrainian top authorities should be cleansed from the foreign agents. And this law on, or rather a bill on collaborationism that was registered with Parliament on the 6th of December 2019, but has not been adopted, should be adopted after all. And this unity should be the only factor that will open up better opportunities for the future. Thank you very much. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to heroes. Thank you very much for your proposals. This statement does reflect a number of very principal provisions that Ukraine should say a resounding no to Putin's criminal claims and demands. And another very important provision is for the Ukrainian authorities to do their best to cleanse Ukraine from Russian propaganda and agents. In addition, I would like to underscore that we will actually collect all of your proposals as an addendum to this document so that they are not lost. And I will give the floor to Mr. Valery Charley, Chair of the Board of the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center, a former Ukrainian ambassador to the USA. Your Excellency, the floor is yours. Esteemed leaders of political parties, leaders of civil initiatives, Ukrainians, friends and brothers, my warmest greetings to all of you on the Ukrainian Unity Day, and I thank you for responding very constructively to Arseny Yatsenuk's invitation to be here today. Once I saw that all of the chairs are occupied, I was very happy, because it's at the times of hardship when the enemy is on your threshold, we can unite and speak in one voice. I'll speak about security. We've got a wonderful chance today to project our optimal security model for the state and for the citizens of this state. Because the Russian threat is a challenge, it is an unprecedented risk, but it is also Russia's last chance to do wrong to Ukraine, because using arms is the last resort in any dispute. So if we withstand it, we will be strong forever. And I understand that all of your parties represent the support of Ukrainian people. And if we look at what is going on in parliamentary parties and those that do not belong to parliament, you are still huge power.
That's why I addressed the parliament, the president, and other political forces to increase threefold next week the allocations for procurement of weapons. It's important to build the infrastructure, but now the key priority is the defense of our country. To triple the salaries of those who are at the front line, to motivate our military so that they should be sure that their families are very well protected socially. In the near future, we should send the message to the whole world that that countries which help Ukraine now, the way the US, Great Britain, Canada, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia do, these countries, those who support or do not reject, like the Netherlands, who changed their position several days ago. All those countries are our friends, and we will help them in the future when Ukraine will have a decisive role in the formation of the future of Europe. We will withstand, and our unity is prerequisite for this. Happy Unity Day to you, and glory to Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank all the participants in today's roundtable discussion for your visions, for your position, for the ideas and thoughts that you've expressed here, and for sending together today a very important and crucial message primarily to the Ukrainian people. Ukraine wants and shall be united. We also send the message to the world. Ukraine is going to fight for its independence and statehood. No enemy can defeat us in that. And your participation in today's discussion is a proof of that. And it is my pleasure to give the floor to Arseniy Yatsenyuk. Dear friends, fellow Ukrainians, I would like to thank each and every one of you for coming here, because by coming here, you address not just your professional community or your colleagues, you address the whole Ukraine. At this roundtable discussion, we have representation of 70% of Ukrainians in political terms, because the political forces represented here account for the level of 70% of the Ukrainian public. Civic society, activists, experts, politicians, this is the backbone of our society. We've sent out the draft of our statement, and with your permission, I will read out the statement of our roundtable discussion, and I would like to ask Mr. Poroshenko, Mr. Razumkov, and esteemed members of parliament, if we approve this statement now, please get it across to your political forces, because you took part in the drafting of this statement. It's meant to the National Roundtable discussion under the auspices of the Kyiv Security Forum, Unity of the People, Protection of Democracy, Defense of the State. Today, marking Ukraine's unity day, we representatives of national political forces and the public call upon the entire Ukrainian people to unite, show solidarity and readiness to defend Ukraine from Russia's aggression. The deadly threat from Russia looming over Ukraine, as well as the course of restoring Ukraine's territorial integrity, the occupation of the Crimea, and return of control over the temporarily occupied areas of the Donbas require our collective mobilization. Mobilization of forces and mutual support within Ukraine are also needed to counter the ongoing onslaught against democracy, the destruction of state institutions, the rollback on reforms, the rise of the Kremlin's fifth column, and the provoked discord among people. We decided to order the society a format of national supra-partisan dialogue to discuss the dangers of Ukraine's external and internal situation. Governments prone to authoritarianism ignore their opponents and seek to silence them. Democratic governments go for a dialogue with them and seek to persuade them. We call on the leadership of Ukraine to show strong will and unite all the Ukrainian people in defense of our state, and to strengthen their alliance with other democracies in order to defend our independence and common freedom. Ukraine must resolutely say no to all of Putin's criminal demands. We call on the authorities and the whole society to realize that the main defenders of our independence are Ukrainian military, and to focus on supporting the armed forces of Ukraine, funding them as a matter of priority, and introducing modern means of deterring the enemy. We call for the accomplishment of historical mission of our time and the completion of transformations and requirements necessary for Ukraine's accession to NATO and the European Union. We demand guaranteed and unwavering adherence to democratic values and freedoms of our people, as well as an end to any illegal persecution of the national opposition, encroachments on freedom of speech and free expression of will. We call for an immediate end to attempts to undermine anti-corruption institutions and for the speediest completion of judicial reform. We call for providing conditions for free economic development in Ukraine, putting an end to the open attack on small, medium and large businesses and foreign investors, and for guaranteed equal, transparent and competitive rules for all, regardless of their proximity to the authorities. We call for a guaranteed course towards full energy independence from Russia and Belarus. We call for strict compliance with the legislation on the protection of Ukrainian as the state language. We call for a systemic fight against Russia's propaganda and its agents. We invite the President of Ukraine to a dialogue and at the same time call upon all interested political parties and public activists throughout the country to cooperate. Time has come to unite the forces of Ukrainian patriots and build networks of joint action to support territorial defense and defend the state together. We call upon the entire free world to support the freedom and struggle of Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. Thank you very much. With this, we conclude our roundtable discussion. Thank you for your support of our statement. Thank you for your interventions and for your participation in today's event. Happy Ukraine's Unity Day once again, and glory to Ukraine. And now we have a family photo opportunity.